I'm going to start. Yeah, I'm David Corrado. I'm going to be talking about ktlint. So, um, the main crux of this is a tool that'll allow you to format and lint your code. I'll explain what that is in a minute. Um, there's many ways to do that, and I'll dig into that a little bit. And the main point of this is to walk you through what I think is the optimal configuration of ktlint, because it's not as easy as just like picking the library and just doing it. Um, there's a lot of things you need to know about. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through it. And I have an example repo that you can look at if you ever are integrating ktlint to see what options I picked and how to set it up. So I'm going to go to the next slide here. So just for definitions, so linting is actually just checking for issues. So generally that's either outputting a report or or actually showing in the IDE the actual issues, or in Android Studio, if you want me to not use abbreviations. Formatting is actually auto-correcting those things. So linting's great, but it's even better if Android Studio just fixes the problems for you. You know, think about it. So we're gonna kind of, and the benefit of ktlint is 90%, I don't know, a bunch of percent of the linting rules that they have there, which they support linting and formatting, also just automatically format. So I'll go to the next slide. So the question is, why do you want to even consider something like this? Why do you want to consider something that lints or formats your codes? So these are a few of the reasons I could think of. So it just makes it so you don't have to have discussions on code style. So when you're doing an MR, you don't need to have discussions about that. You just say ktlint does it, and maybe you can choose to disable certain rules if that's what you want. But for the most part, you don't really need to have. You should not have discussions on code style. Auto formatting makes it so you spend less time formatting your code manually. So I personally, this is probably my number one thing here is, like, I don't like to manually indent my code. And what this does makes it so you can just, in an optimal world, save the file, it automatically tab indents everything for you, and you don't really have to think about it. Um, uh, Also, another thing is, sometimes if you work at large teams, what you'll see is everybody has different personal preferences. So you'll see code over time like toggle between personal preferences back and forth, and it causes code churn and just random changes that are unnecessary. Which you can still do those with ktlint, but there'll be less of them. And then it makes sure that there's consistency with the code. So if you ever seen code that's completely unformatted, like, I don't know, curly braces all over and like all next to each other, and doesn't, and it's kind of indenting well, it just makes code more readable. The styling is consistent. So this is kind of some of the suggestions of what I think, enforcing some sort of code style to do that. And ktlint is probably the most popular way to do it. Android Studio has its own built-in formatter, and I'll explain to you why that's not, in my opinion, the optimal option there. So some features that I look for is I want to be able to format on save. So I'm constantly pressing Command S to save a file, automatically formats it. I don't have to really think about formatting. And there's also sometimes there's plugins that will do like a pre-commit hook, which basically before you commit, it will automatically format your code. But that's not really what I personally like. I like to just have a completely unformatted file and then just run Command S and it just kind of formats everything for me. A big thing for me. Also, you can see your issues in Android Studio, which Android Studio already shows kind of linting errors, but this would be the errors that are specific to the tool that you're running. And also, you want to ensure that consistency is followed by everybody. So if only one person does something, then essentially what happens is when that one person does ktlint, and they touch somebody else's file that did not do ktlint, the whole file is going to be changed. So build machine should enforce that these formatting things are ran. And that's very important to not have files just randomly changed just because a different engineer started going to that file. So alternatives to ktlint. So I'm just going to talk about the different alternatives to ktlint here. The default one that most people probably use is Android Studio has built-in formatting, but the big problem there is you can't really run that on CI easily. I'm interested to see if anybody used any of these other ones too. So at the end of use any of these, you could tell me the pros and cons and told me you chose a different direction and why you chose it. But Android Studio, basically, you can't really format on your CI very easily. So it's useful for you locally. And also a potential problem is every user can potentially accidentally configure their Android Studio a little differently, and it runs the formatting a little differently. So there's some risk there. You might have heard, if you look into this, you might hear about Spotless and Detect, pretty popular tools to use. They essentially under the hood use ktlint or KT format. So you actually like it's not really comparable. You can still use Spotless or Detect with ktlint if you want. Basically, it's if you want functionality on top of ktlint, you would use those kind of SDKs. KT format is pretty interesting. The interesting thing about that is, from my understanding, the output of the format that it runs is deterministic, which means that it's impossible to have differences in files, which is interesting, but it's a little chaotic. And if they built rules that are like really aggressive towards a direction, it kind of makes a lot of bugs. It's less popular. It's actually created by Facebook, I think, during like a I don't know, a hackathon, it seems like. It's not very popular, and I've kind of looked into some of the bug reports of, like, for example, a popular tool you would use is Compose on Android. Like there's bugs that like random things happen there, and then you don't see any comments back. So like there's bugs there, and the community, I feel like the community is just not there, in my opinion. This last one's very interesting. I don't know how to say it, Kudana. It's a new tool. I think I heard about it within the last 6 months. It's pretty new. And essentially, I think what the goal there is to basically kind of do the Android Studio format, but in the cloud, or not in the cloud, but on your CI. I haven't looked into it a lot. I kind of try to find blogs on people setting it up. Really, I haven't found anything on it. It's so new. But there is instructions on how to set it up on Android Studio. So if somebody eventually wants to try to set it up and give a talk, that would be something interesting to explore. But like all of these are okay options. I wouldn't say you shouldn't do any of these. Android Studio format's totally fine if you're the only engineer. Like if you don't need to ensure consistency on a team, it's fine. So now I'm going to start walking through how do you set it up. So it's a lot more complicated than it seems to set up a formatter. Unfortunately, it's just not like built into the IDE and just works magically. So there's 3 different parts that you need to do to configure ktlint. So the first one is ktlint in itself is actually just a command line tool. It doesn't work directly in Android Studio. So to get it working in Android Studio, you need to install a Gradle plugin. The Gradle plugin will run the ktlint task and kind of give you more options, kind of abstract the command line options from you and kind of just make it easier to work with. So what that Gradle plugin does is give you the ability to run a Gradle task inside of Android Studio. and you can do a lint, or you can do a format. And the output of that is just like HTML or text or something like that. And then the third thing you would do is an IntelliJ plugin. So the IntelliJ plugin is actually what makes this pretty cool. So it'll actually show the ID issues or the ktlint issues directly in your Kotlin code. But there's a problem with that. The problem with that is that the ktlint version that is embedded with the plugin version has to match the version that's in your code. So it's kind of problematic, but there's benefits there, and there's ways to lock in your IntelliJ plugin, which I'll walk you through. So this next thing is so the ktlint. This is I'm going to kind of go through my configuration recommendation in specific. So ktlint, the plugin, essentially you can use the latest one and actually the latest ktlint, which is nice. So just recently all this stuff got updated, so it works pretty nice together. And then I'm gonna kind of walk you through inside of Android Studio how to configure this, or what I did to configure this real quick. So if we actually look at the commit, you can kind of see exactly what I did. Essentially what I did, I don't know if I can zoom in here. Oh crap, I can't really zoom in here. I'll actually just go to this file. I have it open here. So this is the line where you install the Gradle plugin.
Are you showing something else other than the browser?
I must not be sharing, right? Let me share again. Desktop. I thought I was sharing. Okay, yep, there it goes. So this is the plugin, the Gradle plugin. You don't really need to do a whole lot, which is nice. This is and also their goal is to be configurationless. So you really don't need a whole lot of options here. So to install the Gradle plugin is you add this line here, and then at the bottom here you can choose what ktlint version you want. And what I did is here is enabled that I'm running the Android specific rules. It's pretty, the Android specific rules are actually not that different from the default set rules. Pretty minimal different, but I just chose Android just because that's probably the best. You basically are, what they're doing is they're making you follow the Android Kotlin best practices, which is a doc on. So then this is thing called an editor config. What this also gives you some the ktlint plugin actually, no, so ktlint actually reads these editor configs and actually imports those. So if you want to disable a rule, this is where you do. So I disabled these two rules, which is import ordering and wildcard imports. And the reason why I did that is because those aren't automatically fixed on format, and I just didn't want to really have to deal with those because essentially one of kind of my premises is an engineer should like not have to really think about this. So I just kind of disabled those rules. And then after, so when you actually, I'll actually walk through what it looks like to set up the plugin. So those are all the Gradle configurations that I kind of set up by default. I will walk you through the ktlint one. So there's the ktlint plugin. It is right here. You'll see that there you have to redefine your disabled rules here. It's kind of small, so you can't really see them very well. But you have to redefine these rules. But the good thing is it's saved to your source code. This ktlint.xml file. And what I did is I also checked the run ktlint format on save, and I also checked the Android mode, and all this is actually saved into this ktlint configuration file. So you just need to make sure you commit this to your repo, and anybody that opens up your project will automatically have the configuration change to this if they have the plugin installed. And one other thing is when you are installing the ktlint plugin, essentially what you should do, I'll just walk you through it real quick. You just go to plugin, search here, and then you click on this settings, install plugin from disk, and you just choose the ktlint plugin that you want to do, just the zip file, and it will just automatically install it. And the benefit of that is it locks you in on that version. So you could just search for it on the store, but if you did that, then you're going to get updates. And then if you get updates, your engineers are just going to be following the new ktlint rules, which is going to cause random updates to your code base. So you want to lock everybody in on a specific ktlint plugin version, in my opinion. Let me see here. So that's kind of the configuration options. It's pretty simple. And then also, so how you run, I just want to show you real quick how this works. So inside of here, like for example, if I had like a bunch of like random returns, I could just Command S and it automatically fixes it. I have a bunch of returns here, and I have the plugin running, so I could actually manually tell it to fix itself. And then also, let's think of something that's like bad. Like, what if somebody had a bunch of spaces there? Same thing. Command S would fix it. It's pretty nice. Just kind of does everything for you. But there is certain things that it doesn't do for you. Like it's not perfect. It's not going to give you the same results every single time. So that's why during code review, you have to make sure people are not randomly changing files or running other formatters. Because if you have I think if you have a return here, like the formatter won't find that. So like maybe so then like somebody comes in and then says, hey, I actually don't like that. I'm gonna do optimize imports. And it's gonna kind of optimize that, changes to a star, and then you're gonna have code churn. You want to kind of tell your engineers, in my opinion, to not do that, to just only use ktlint. It's just so everybody has consistency and you just don't have random changes. Let's go back to the slides to see if there's anything else interesting there. I actually posted in their forums about the wildcard import and the import ordering rules. I essentially deleted those because I didn't want to have to really think about it. But what you can do is I think you can set up your Android Studio to remember your configuration options to automatically format. And as long as those are built in your source code and automatically applied on a project level, you should be able to re-enable those. I haven't seen any blogs or exact steps on how to do that. I might eventually do that, so that might be something that people entertain. But for now, I just disable those rules just so you don't have to think about that. You may want to decide to enable code styling, which I did in my MR. It kind of follows the best practices defined in there. It's very, very minimal differences there. Also, keep in mind is that ktlint is never going to be the same as Android Studio formatting. I reported a bug where there was an unused import, and basically they said that, hey, this is going to be a bunch of work to fix, or just we don't have the proper data the same data as Android Studio, so we just can't do the optimized import as good as them. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's never going to be the same. So really, my opinion, you want to build into your project configuration an exact formatting rule and have everybody consistently run that, whatever those rules are. And another thing that's important is keep an eye out for formatting changes, because let's say somebody accidentally did not follow the instructions on like importing in the plugin, right, it could have unexpected code churn. Also in Android Studio, like a very popular thing to do is inside of here when you're committing, like there's a option in here to tell it to automatically format your code. People shouldn't be doing this because that will cause random code churn. Just keep random comments about MRs and configuration changes and just having random updates in the code base. I recommend just to keep everything to ktlint. That's what we agreed to through at my work, and it just kind of makes it so easier, and you don't really have to have discussions as long as everybody just, usually a person changes a setting and then you catch it and you say, hey, reset that setting, and then it's not a problem anymore. But yeah, that's essentially what I got. Does anybody have any questions on ktlint or want to give their opinion on another formatter or linter?
I just got something kind of related. I use SwiftLint, and we can run that on like GitHub pull request or anything like that. Can you do that with ktlint where it would run it on the pull request and you could see the warnings or anything there? Or I guess it's kind of weird when, you know, it automatically does it on save.
Yeah, there's you can, I recommend anybody that uses ktlint to enforce it as a test rule on your CI. So you can't merge until you're passing that test rule. But then there's also a pre-commit hook available, which I think it generally formats the code. So if you want to make it impossible for people to merge, it's actually, pre-commit hooks are never enforced usually. They're like just the way that they work, you can't guarantee that those are running because a person could ignore those. But that's a good way to check that you never have unformatted code committed to your code base. But my rule is essentially you don't have any unformatted code merged into the developer master branch. But I have seen other people, like I think Twitter uses the pre-commit hook in ktlint. It's pretty popular, like the most popular option. Basically everybody, most people use it, don't use other things from what I've seen, like on reviewing other things, and or like kind of use their own built-in thing. But I've seen like Twitter like 6 months ago released additional ktlint custom rules that you could add on top of your ktlint, which is just additional rule set to make compose, follow best practices. So there's things like that expansions you can add if you want, and it'll automatically kind of run those checks for you. Yeah, we have not used those. Those rules, I don't know if you've heard, but those got deprecated, and they're there's a new version. Yeah.
We're not on the new version yet.
Yeah, well, just I think it just happened like last week or something like that.
So David, what you're saying is that we can use the same version of ktlint on the CI/CD as we do with Android Studio. So we can force the format from Android Studio, and if someone just make a mistake and we just forgot it in the code review, it's going to be catch in the CI/CD before we even merge to master. So
Yeah,
that double check.
Yeah, and how it runs in your CIDE is it just actually runs the ktlint like lint ktlint lint task that's built in. So it automatically will run the same ktlint version as your project because it just runs the Gradle task.
Got you. So my concern here is that is it going to check every single class that we have, or only the class that we changed?
It'll check the whole project, I think. I don't think it might do optimizations. Well, actually, depends on most people. It depends on what you cache in your CI because probably most times your CI doesn't cache that stuff. I don't know. I've never ran into a problem where it doesn't format. I think it just formats the whole thing. It actually runs very quickly. It's like
to be honest, I'm worried about the CI/CD because it takes time right now to finish everything, and if we need to add something like that, maybe it will take more time, which we don't like to do.
Yeah, I think it's like it's not anything. It's like it's probably like 1% of your build time at max. It's like nothing.
Same
It,
with
it's super super quick. Like
and
your tests are gonna take tons longer, or setting up the build machine is gonna take tons longer because you're actually not installing anything there. It's actually just running a Gradle task. So it's very quick.
and it's the same thing with the plugin with Android Studio.
The plugin with Android Studio doesn't run on the CI/CD, but locally, um, locally, like it just analyzes your code just like the Android Studio linter would do. So like the built-in one. So it shouldn't bog down your computer, but it's that plugin's written by one guy, I think. So like hypothetically there could be performance issues, but I haven't really seen anybody. I haven't seen anybody complain about it. And also, you don't need to run the plugin. You don't have to. If somebody doesn't want to use wants to use VS Code to do Android Studio, they can't to run their Android project. They can. It just the rule is before it gets merged, it needs to run to the formatter, right? So they can manually run the task.
Got you. Okay, that makes
Anybody,
sense.
have any like it left if the IntelliJ plugin like sucks or breaks one day, you can just stop using it. It's more of a benefit. Yeah, it would be nice if Android was as good as Swiftlet. Swiftlet is super easy to integrate into your app. But yeah, the ktlint is a lot more comp. Like
Yeah, so the
you
plugin
have
also
a lot of
check
things.
everything. Sorry.
I'll go ahead.
No, I'm just asking if the plugin also check every single file or just the file that we changed.
The plugin.
Yeah.
The plugin will evaluate as you're typing. You can with the plugin tell it to format your entire repo. You can tell it to do that. Which is what when you're integrating with ktlint, that's the first thing you do is you format the whole repo.
Yeah. So not every time it has to reformat the whole repo. It's just while typing.
Yeah, but the CI will make sure your whole repo is formatted every single
Makes sense.
MR. Yeah, I like hypothetical. It should if you're running the right Gradle task, it'll run your whole project.
Thank you.
Can you define your own rules with regex?
Yeah, you can define your own ktlint rules. I don't
Okay.
know how it works, but I imagine it's pretty similar to
Yeah.
that's what the Twitter people did. So I guess it must be pretty powerful, right? So I don't know.
Mhm. Okay. No, that's cool.
Cool.